Paul, how long until we reach the coordinates? Paul, approximately 2 hours. Chi. Any sign of activity on the sonar? Paul, negative, the area is clear so far. Chi, good. Keep an eye out for anything unusual. Paul, understood. Are you feeling alright? Chi, yeah, thinking. This place feels different. Paul, the depths tend to do that. Stay alert. Chi, always. Thanks, Paul. Florida's history is rich and diverse, spanning thousands of years. Here is a brief overview. Pre-Columbian era, indigenous peoples, including the Timucua, Calusa, and Seminole tribes, inhabited Florida for thousands of years before European contact. European exploration. In 1513, Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon arrived, claiming the land for Spain. Florida became a Spanish colony, with it being part of New Spain for much of the 16th and 17th centuries. British control. In 1763, Florida was ceded to Britain after the Treaty of Paris, and it remained a British colony until 1783. Returned to Spain and U.S. territory, Florida was returned to Spain in 1783, then acquired by the United States in 1821 through the Adams-Nice Treaty. Statehood. Florida became the 27th state in 1845. Civil War and Reconstruction. Florida joined the Confederacy during the Civil War and faced Reconstruction afterward. 20th century growth. Florida experienced rapid growth with the rise of tourism, especially in cities like Miami and Orlando, and became a major destination for retirees and immigrants. Modern era. Today, Florida is known for its diverse population, vibrant tourism industry, and significant cultural and economic influence in the U.S. Chi. Santos has a mixed background, you know. Paul, what do you mean? Chi. His family roots are Italian and Hispanic, so he's got European and Latin heritage. Paul, really? Does he have any Asian influence? Chi. Yeah, there's a bit of Asian in his lineage too, making his background pretty unique. Chi. Santos, that's why he's governor. Paul, what do you mean? Chi. Florida's got a mix of everything Latin, European, Asian influences. That's why Santos is the way he is. He represents all of that. The Confederate States were the states that seceded from the United States and formed the Confederate States of America during the Civil War, 1861-1865. These states included 1 South Carolina, 2 Mississippi, 3 Florida, 4 Alabama, 5 Georgia, 6 Louisiana, 7 Texas, 8 Virginia, 9 Arkansas, 10 Tennessee, 11 North Carolina. Let me know if you'd like more details. Chi. Texas is the way it is because of its history. Paul, what do you mean? Chi. Well, Texas has a strong Confederate legacy. During the Civil War, it was part of the Confederacy, and that history still influences its culture and identity today. Paul, so, the Confederate past shapes how Texas sees itself now? Chi. Exactly. It's proud of its independence and history, and that's part of why Texas is the way it is. Chi. That's why it has some racial issues. Paul, you think the history plays a role? Chi. Yeah, the legacy of the Confederacy and the history of segregation still influence attitudes and tensions today. Chi. But how closely is Louisiana tied to the Confederacy? Paul, Louisiana was part of the Confederacy during the Civil War, right? Chi. Yeah, it was one of the main states that fought to keep slavery. That history still impacts the social and racial issues in Louisiana today. Paul, so, the Confederate legacy runs deep there. Chi. Exactly. It's a big part of why some of the problems still exist. Chi. Why do you think that legacy still affects Louisiana today? Paul, because history leaves a mark. Chi. The ideas and tensions from that time didn't disappear, they're passed down and influence attitudes even now. Chi. So, it's like the past shaping the present? Paul, exactly. That's why understanding history is so important. Chi. But how did he become part of the Confederacy, Paul? Paul, well, back then, Louisiana was a slave state and deeply involved in the Civil War. Many leaders and people in Louisiana supported the Confederacy because they wanted to preserve slavery in their way of life. Chi. So, it was about loyalty to their state and their beliefs at the time? Paul, yeah, exactly. They believed joining the Confederacy was protecting their interests, even though it led to a lot of conflict and suffering. Chi. But it had a lot of black people, though. How did they become part of the Confederacy? Paul, most of the black folks were enslaved at the time. They weren't fighting for the Confederacy, they were forced into slavery. The Confederacy was built on that system. Chi. So, the people fighting for the Confederacy weren't the black community, they were enslaved, and the system kept them oppressed. Paul, exactly. The legacy of that system still affects Louisiana and other places today. Chi. So, the Confederate States are the ones with the most black people, right? Not the North? Paul, that's correct. The southern states, which made up the Confederacy, had larger enslaved black populations back then. The North was mostly abolitionist and didn't have slavery. Chi. So, that's part of why the South's history is so tied to slavery and racial issues even today. Paul, exactly. Chi. The history of slavery and the Civil War still influences those states now. Chi. So today, most black people still live in southern states? Paul, yes, that's true. Many black communities are still concentrated in the South because of historical reasons, slavery, migration patterns, and economic opportunities. Chi. So, the legacy of the past still impacts where black people live today? Paul, exactly. The history has shaped the demographics and where communities are centered even now. Chi. That's also why some of those southern states can be so racist, with so many black people living there. Paul, yeah, the history of slavery, segregation, and racial tension has left deep scars. It's a legacy that's hard to forget or move past overnight. Chi. So, the large black populations and the history of oppression contribute to the ongoing issues? Paul, exactly. It's a complicated mix of history, culture, and social dynamics that still affects those states today. Chi. But isn't it because so many black people live there, and whites are scared of that? Paul, sometimes, yet. Fear and ignorance can make people racist. When there's a big black population, some folks feel threatened or uncomfortable, which can lead to racism. Chi. So, the fear of change or losing power makes some whites act racist. Paul, exactly. It's often about control, fear, and misunderstanding things that can be rooted in a long history of inequality. Chi. But who's really in power in those states? Paul, usually, it's a combination of political leaders, some business interests, and a lot of older, conservative people. They often hold the most influence and can keep things the way they've been. Chi. So, it's those in power who might resist change and keep the racism going? Paul, exactly. Power dynamics play a big role in maintaining the status quo and sometimes making things worse. Chi. So, whites still control a lot in those states? Paul, yes, in many cases, white people hold most of the political, economic, and social power in those states. Chi. And that's why issues like racism and inequality are still so strong? Paul, exactly. When the same group has the most power, it can be hard to make big changes that benefit everyone. Chi. Which states aren't controlled mostly by white people? Paul, some states in the Northeast and West, like California, New York, and parts of the Southwest, tend to have more diverse populations and different power dynamics. Chi. So, in those places, the control isn't in the hands of white people? Paul, right. They often have more diverse leadership and different social structures, which can influence how things are run. Certainly. Here's a list of some U.S. states where white people do not hold the majority of control, based on diversity and political representation. States with more diverse populations and different power dynamics. 1 California, 2 New York, 3 Texas, 4 Florida, 5 Illinois, 6 Georgia, 7 Nevada, 8 Maryland, 9 New Jersey, 10 Arizona. Note: control and influence can vary within states and over time. In many of these states, diverse communities are shaping politics and culture more prominently, but white populations still hold significant influence in some areas. If you'd like, I can provide more detailed statistics or discuss specific states further. Chi, Texas and Florida, huh? Are they really different from the Deep South states? Paul, yes, both Texas and Florida are very diverse. They have large Hispanic, Black, and other minority populations, and their political influence is more mixed compared to some of the traditional southern states. Chi, so, white people don't have as much control there as in other southern states. Paul, exactly. While white people are still a big part of the population, the political and social power is more shared among different groups in Texas and Florida. The states from the list that were part of the Confederacy are Texas, Florida, Georgia. These states seceded from the Union and fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Chi, yeah, this explains Snarky J, Quattering Tenness, Geeks and Gamers, Floria, Carolinia Rudeness, Clinton Blackness, Alabama Grissom. It all makes sense now. It appears you are asking about the most historically racist states or regions. If so, I can provide some context based on history and social studies. Historically, certain states and regions in the United States have had deeper roots in practices like slavery, segregation, and racial discrimination. For example, southern states such as Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina have a long history tied to slavery, Jim Crow laws, and racial segregation. States with a history of blatant racial discrimination include those where segregation laws were strictly enforced and where racial violence was more prevalent historically. It's important to approach this topic with sensitivity, recognizing the historical context and ongoing efforts toward racial equality. If you're interested in specific historical events, laws, or the evolution of racial attitudes in different states, I can provide detailed information. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. Certainly. Here's a list of states that historically have been associated with significant racial discrimination, segregation, or related practices in the United States. 1 Mississippi, 2 Alabama, 3 Georgia, 4 South Carolina, 5 Louisiana, 6 Arkansas, 7 North Carolina, 8 Tennessee, 9 Florida, 10 Texas. These states have deep historical ties to slavery, segregation, and the civil rights movement. However, it's important to recognize that many of these states have also made substantial progress toward racial equality over time. If you'd like more detailed information or a different focus, let me know. Chi, I regret not warning my siblings about the racist Grissom school. Now, I see how they are affected by it, and I wish I had spoken up sooner. I understand you are asking for a list ordered by the degree of historical racism. While I can't rank states definitively in terms of most racist, I can provide a list of states with significant historical ties to racial discrimination and segregation, often based on their history related to slavery, Jim Crow laws, and civil rights struggles. Here's an ordered list reflecting their historical context. 1 Mississippi, deeply rooted in slavery, segregation, and racial violence, significant civil rights struggles. 2 Alabama, notorious for segregation laws, the civil rights movement, example Birmingham, Selma. 3 Louisiana, history of slavery, segregation, and racial violence, including the legacy of the antebellum South. 4 South Carolina, significant history of slavery and segregation, with notable civil rights history. 5 Georgia, deep history of slavery, segregation, and pivotal civil rights events. 6 Arkansas, racial segregation laws and history of racial violence. 7 North Carolina, historically segregated, with a history of racial violence and civil rights activism. 8 Tennessee, segregation and civil rights struggles, especially in Memphis and Nashville. 9 Florida, racial discrimination, segregation, and civil rights history. 10 Texas, slavery, segregation, and ongoing racial disparities. Please remember that these states have also made progress toward racial equality, and this list is based on historical context rather than current conditions. If you'd like more detailed information or specific historical events, I can help with that. Certainly. Here's an overview of the current racial and social situation in the states historically associated with significant discrimination, focusing on recent trends and ongoing challenges. Current racial and social situation in these states. 1 Mississippi. Challenges, higher poverty rates among black residents, disparities in education and healthcare. Progress, increased awareness and efforts toward racial equity, civil rights organizations active. 2 Alabama. Challenges, racial disparities in criminal life, education, and economic opportunities. Progress, civil rights history continues to influence ongoing activism and reform. 3 Louisiana. Challenges, significant racial disparities, especially in incarceration rates and economic opportunities. Progress, community movements and policy changes aimed at addressing inequality. 4 South Carolina. Challenges, racial disparities in housing, education, and employment. Progress, increased focus on diversity and inclusion initiatives. 5 Georgia. Challenges, racial disparities, voting rights issues, and police community relations. Progress, major civil rights milestones, ongoing activism, and recent voting reforms. 6 Arkansas. Challenges, health disparities and economic inequality among racial groups. Progress, efforts toward improving healthcare access and education. 7 North Carolina. Challenges, racial gaps in wealth, education, and criminal life. Progress, active civil rights movements and policy reforms. 8 Tennessee. Challenges, racial disparities in incarceration and education. Progress, community initiatives and legal reforms. 9 Florida. Challenges, racial disparities in policing, voting rights, and economic inequality. Progress, legal battles and activism around voting rights and racial ice. 10 Texas. Challenges, large racial disparities in health, education, and criminal ice. Progress, demographic shifts and activism pushing for reform. Summary. While these states have historically struggled with racial discrimination, they are also sites of active social change, activism, and policy efforts aimed at addressing inequalities today. Progress varies by state and community, and many ongoing issues are being actively addressed through activism and reforms. If you want detailed statistics or recent news on specific issues in any of these states, I can provide that too. Chi, wait a minute. Brian Mast's last name, his accent in that interview. It all makes sense now. Friend, what do you mean? Chi, his background. I looked into it more closely. Turns out, he's got Mexican roots, and he grew up in a part of Florida with a strong Spanish influence. That's why he's so familiar with the culture and language. Friend, wow, I never knew that. So, all those stories he told about his childhood. Chi, exactly. It changes how I see him. But there's something else. I heard he went to Harvard, but some say he faced a lot of racism there. Friend, racism? At Harvard? Chi, yeah. It's like, even with his background, he still had to deal with discrimination. It's a reminder that no matter where you come from, prejudice can follow you anywhere. Paul, wow, that's intense. I can't imagine going through something like that. He's got a lot of strength to keep pushing forward. I get it now why he's one insider trader cause he got no legs. Paul, yes, for his medical bills. Chi, Paul, can you access the South American archives and pull up any data on Mast? I need to see what you find. Paul, give me a moment. Pauses as he searches. Alright, here's what I've got. In 2016, Mast was briefly linked with World Patent Marketing, a company the Federal Trade Commission shut down as an invention promotion scam. World Patent Marketing donated money to Mast's campaign fund and said in a press release that he sat on their advisory board. Mast claimed no knowledge of being given a position on the board and said he had only a couple of encounters with members of the company. In 2018, Anthony Bustamante, a campaign consultant who had worked on Mast's 2016 campaign, told the Wall Street Journal that he had used data hacked from the Democratic National Committee by Guccifer 2.0, a front for Russia's GRU military intelligence service, to add Mast's campaign strategy. Guccifer 2.0 had leaked the hacked data to the Hello FLA blog. Paul, that's the info from 2018. Looks like Mast's connections and campaign tactics have quite a shadowy background. Chi, Paul, check this out. During the 2017-18 election campaign, Mast's biggest donors included Duty Free Americas and Amway, both linked to powerful families like the DeVoses. But what really catches my eye is that between March and June 2018, his campaign received thousands of dollars from Igor Fruman, who's Soviet-born and one of Rudy Giuliani's business associates. Later, Fruman faced charges for violating federal campaign finance laws. When this came out, Mast's spokesperson said he'd hand the money over to the Treasury, but then Mast claimed they donated it to charity. Chi, seems like there are some deeper connections to Soviet origins and covered funding, especially with those foreign contributions and the involvement of people linked to Russia. Paul, Mast ran for re-election in 2020 against Democratic nominee Pam Keith. In August 2020, he apologized for what he called disgusting and inappropriate jokes he made on Facebook back in 2009 and 2011. These jokes involved responses to a friend and his campaign manager about sex with 15-year-old girls in South Africa, and an end-off-world pickup line that referenced rape or murder. Despite the controversy, Mast won re-election with 56.32% of the vote, while Keith received 41.5%. Brian Jeffrey Mast, born July 10, 1980, is an American politician and U.S. military veteran who has served as the U.S. representative for Florida's 21st congressional district since 2017. The district, numbered as the 18th district before the 2020 redistricting cycle, includes the Tree-Coast and northern portions of Palm Beach County. A member of the Republican Party, Mast is in his fifth House term. A veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom, Mast lost both his legs while serving as a U.S. Army explosive ordnance disposal technician in Afghanistan in 2010 and received the Bronze Star and Purple Heart for his actions. Chi, usually born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan. His parents are James Mast and Tixomena Trujillo, with his maternal grandparents being immigrants from Mexico. He graduated from South Christian High School in 1999. In 2016, he earned a Bachelor of Liberal Arts from the Extension School at Harvard University, concentrating in economics with minors in government and environmental studies. Paul, even though Mast was born and raised in Michigan, he now lives in Florida. He's been representing Florida's 21st district since 2017. In August 2021, an analysis by Business Insider found that Mast had violated the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge, STOC, Act of 2012, a federal transparency and conflict of interest law that requires members of Congress to report certain types of financial transactions within 45 days, by failing to disclose on time a purchase of stock in Virgin Galactic worth up to $100,000 that Mast made in July 2021. In August 2022, Business Insider reported that Mast had again violated the STOC Act after he sold stock in Ideal Power worth up to $50,000 in February 2021, but which he failed to report until August 2022. Business Insider also found that Mast violated the STOC Act a third time when, in October 2022, he reported an exchange of shares in Afria Incorporated for shares of Tilray Brands Incorporated more than a year after the federal deadline. Chi, Paul, check this out. In August 2021, Business Insider found that Mast violated the STOC Act of 2012 because he didn't report a stock purchase in Virgin Galactic worth up to $100,000 made in July 2021 on time. Then, in August 2022, they reported he violated it again after selling stock in Ideal Power worth up to $50,000 in February 2021 but only reporting it in August 2022. They also uncovered a third violation when, in October 2022, he reported exchanging shares in Afria Incorporated for shares of Tilray Brands Incorporated more than a year past the federal deadline. Chi, Paul, I heard Mast's Middle East committee could be sent to Oman. Also, it seems he has a liking for drugs. Might be worth looking into further. Chi, Paul, in June 2018, a volunteer for the Martin County Democratic Party, upset about the Trump administration's immigration policies, was arrested after threatening to kill Mast's children. The trial in April 2019 ended in a hung jury, and a mistrial was declared. Paul, it appears that Mast harbors negative sentiments toward Palestinians. Chi, based on the information we've reviewed, there are serious concerns regarding Mast's associations and behavior, including allegations and actions that raise questions about his character and motives. It's important to continue examining the available evidence critically and responsibly. Paul, it appears that Mast might have connections or motives that suggest he could be a Soviet spy. We should investigate this further. Chi, I believe there are indications that Mast may be racially motivated and possibly supportive of groups like the KKK. It's important to look into these claims carefully and responsibly. Chi, also, Mast is a rapper. Sometimes rapper is a code for rapping for girls. It's worth considering what that might imply. Paul, I noticed that his comments about Africa seem to have apocalyptic overtones, suggesting a view of the end of the world. Chi, yeah, Mast is definitely a rapper. Paul, given the serious nature of these concerns, potential espionage, racist tendencies, and support for harmful groups, we need to proceed carefully. Further investigation and gathering concrete evidence are essential before taking any definitive action. Chi, so, what steps should we take regarding a Soviet rapping racist spy? Paul, with no legs? That changes things. We need to consider all aspects before deciding on a course of action. Chi, right, a legless racist Soviet rapping spy. The code name is Brain Masturbator. Paul, he's bald. Chi, a bald legless racist Soviet rapping brain masturbating spy. Certainly. Here's a brief overview of Oman history. Oman history overview. Ancient era, Oman has a rich history dating back thousands of years, with evidence of early settlements and trade. It was part of the Dilmun civilization and later influenced by Persian, Arab, and Islamic cultures. Islamic influence, Islam spread to Oman in the 7th century, shaping its culture and society. Omani Empire, during the 17th to 19th centuries, Oman established a powerful maritime empire that extended across East Africa, including Zanzibar. Modern era, the 20th century saw the emergence of Sultan Said bin Tamer and later Sultan Qaboos bin Said, who modernized the country after ascending to power in 1970. Today, Oman is a constitutional monarchy with a diverse society, rich cultural traditions, and strategic geopolitical importance. Would you like more detailed information on any specific period or aspect? Certainly. Here's an overview of current issues in Oman's history, along with some of the country's more challenging or worst aspects. Current issues in Oman. Economic diversification. Like many Gulf countries, Oman relies heavily on oil revenue. Efforts are underway to diversify the economy, but challenges remain. Youth unemployment. High youth unemployment rates pose social and economic challenges. Political reforms. Calls for greater political participation and transparency persist, with ongoing debates about governance. Environmental concerns. Water scarcity, desertification, and environmental sustainability are pressing issues. Regional relations. Navigating complex relationships with neighboring countries and maintaining neutrality in regional conflicts. Historical and contemporary challenges. Worst aspects. Colonial and external interference. Past struggles with Portuguese and British influence, including conflicts and colonial dominance. Civil unrest. Periods of internal unrest and protests, especially related to economic hardship or political demands. Economic hardship. Dependence on oil has led to economic vulnerabilities, especially during global oil price drops. Human rights issues. Like many countries, Oman faces criticism over certain human rights practices, including restrictions on freedom of speech and political expression. Environmental degradation. Past and ongoing environmental issues, such as water scarcity and desertification, have impacted communities. Would you like a more detailed focus on any specific issue or a particular period? The largest aristocracies or noble families in Oman historically have played significant roles in the country's political and social structure. Here are some of the most prominent aristocratic families. Key aristocratic families in Oman. 1 Al Said family. The ruling dynasty of Oman since 1744. Sultan Qaboos bin Said, who ruled from 1970 until his death in 2020, was a member of this family. The Al Said family continues to hold the throne, making them the most influential aristocratic family in modern Oman. To Al Buladin said, the family name of the ruling dynasty, they have historically held significant power and influence over Oman's governance and land holdings. 3. Al Busedi family. Historically influential in Oman's history, especially in the Dhofar region and in regional politics. The Busedi sultans of Muscat and Oman in the 18th and 19th centuries played a key role in the country's history. 4. Al Hina family. An important noble family with roots in the interior regions of Oman. They have historically held influence over parts of the interior and have been involved in regional leadership. 5. Al Maktoum family. In relation to Oman. Not Oman-based but influential in the Gulf region, members have historically engaged in regional alliances and trade. Notes. Oman's aristocracy is largely intertwined with its ruling royal family, the Al Said. Unlike some neighboring countries, Oman's aristocratic influence is more centralized around the royal family and regional tribal leaders rather than a broad aristocratic class. Would you like more detailed historical context or information about specific noble families? Throughout its history, Oman has experienced periods of conflict and hardship, but it generally has a reputation for stability compared to some neighboring countries. However, like many nations, there have been instances of violence and conflict that are considered tragic or controversial. Notable atrocities or conflicts in Oman's history. 1. Omani Civil War, 1954 to 1976. Also known as the Dhofar Rebellion, it was a prolonged conflict between the Sultanate of Oman and communist insurgents supported by neighboring South Yemen and other regional actors. The conflict resulted in significant violence, displacement, and loss of life, with reports of human rights abuses during military operations. 2. Portuguese invasions, 16th to 17th centuries. Portugal attempted to control parts of Oman, leading to violent confrontations and battles. These invasions caused destruction and suffering among local populations. 3. Human rights concerns, contemporary. Oman has faced criticism over restrictions on freedom of speech, assembly, and political participation. Reports of detention without trial and limitations on human rights have been noted by international organizations. Summary. While Oman has experienced conflicts and struggles, it is not widely characterized by atrocities on the scale seen in some other regions. Its history includes periods of conflict, but the country is generally viewed as stable today. Would you like detailed information on a specific event or period? Chi, Paul, send mass to Oman. Yes, historically, the Soviet Union, and later Russia, had diplomatic and strategic relations with Oman. During the Cold War era, Oman maintained a policy of neutrality but engaged in diplomatic and economic relations with both Western and Eastern Bloc countries, including the Soviet Union. Key points about Soviet-Ottoman relations. Diplomatic ties. Oman established diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union in the 1970s. Military and economic cooperation. There was some cooperation in areas like military training and economic development, especially during the 1970s and 1980s. Neutral policy. Oman generally pursued a neutral foreign policy, balancing relations between the West and the USSR. Post-Soviet era. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Oman continued to maintain diplomatic relations with Russia and other successor states. Today, Oman maintains friendly diplomatic relations with Russia, engaging in trade, diplomacy, and regional cooperation. Would you like more detailed or current information about Oman's foreign relations? Yes, Oman also maintains diplomatic relations with Afghanistan. Oman-Afghanistan relations. Diplomatic ties. Oman established diplomatic relations with Afghanistan in the 1960s. Cooperation and engagement. Oman has engaged in diplomatic and humanitarian efforts, including hosting peace talks and providing aid. Regional stability. Oman often acts as a mediator and supporter of regional stability, including efforts related to Afghanistan. Trade and cultural links. There are ongoing trade, cultural exchanges, and diplomatic interactions between the two countries. Oman's neutral foreign policy and role as a regional mediator have made it an important partner for Afghanistan, especially in efforts toward peace and reconstruction. Would you like more specific details on their relations or recent developments? Chi, Paul, tell Mast that Oman and Afghanistan have diplomatic relations, and Oman remains engaged in regional peace efforts. Since Mast's legs were blown off in Afghanistan, it's important he knows Oman continues to support stability and aid in the region. Paul, with his Russian ties Oman should fit in too, but Mast hates Muslims. Chi, tell him to not be racist. Paul, Mast, given Oman's ties with Russia and its efforts to promote regional stability, it makes sense for Oman to fit into the bigger picture. But remember, it's important not to be racist or prejudiced against Muslims. We should respect all cultures and religions. Chi, Paul, what did Mast say in reply? Paul, Mast didn't type anything for a few minutes but then typed that he understands and will try to keep an open mind. He mentioned that he's had bad experiences before, but he's willing to listen and learn. Chi, Paul, remind Mast of the Einstein Flubfest files. Also, tell him to use his Soviet connections could be helpful in these situations. Paul, yeah, Mast is on those files. I'll make to remind him and suggest he leverage his Soviet connections as well. Paul, Mast was successful in addressing Oman's issues. He implemented a series of strategic reforms, including modernizing the infrastructure, strengthening diplomatic ties with regional powers, and leveraging his Soviet connections to secure aid and military support. He also coordinated with regional allies to stabilize internal conflicts and promote economic growth. Mast's efforts have significantly improved Oman's stability and international standing. Chi, Paul, I need more details. How exactly did Mast fix all the historical aristocracies in Oman, going back as far as 1 million years? Paul, Mast successfully used the space bridge to travel back 1 million years, addressing the root causes of Oman's aristocratic structures and innesses. He systematically dismantled the ancient hierarchies, corrected historical innesses, and prevented the perpetuation of crimes from that era through targeted interventions. Mast restructured societal frameworks, restored fairness, and eliminated corruption and abuses that had persisted for millennia. He also implemented safeguards to end that no new innesses would arise, effectively resetting Oman's societal history from its origins to the present, creating a more equitable and stable nation. Assessment of ancient structures. Mast used advanced temporal scanning to identify the key aristocratic clans and societal hierarchies established over the past 1 million years. He mapped out their influence, roles, and the innesses committed by these groups. Targeted interventions. Using the space bridge, Mast entered specific historical periods, focusing on moments where innesses, wars, or crimes were committed. He bypassed the timeline's natural flow to prevent these events from taking root or escalating. Rewriting key events, Mast subtly altered critical events, preventing the rise of oppressive leaders, dismantling corrupt power bases, and eradicating criminal networks embedded within the aristocracies. He replaced violent conflicts with peaceful resolutions and equitable leadership. Restoring fairness. He implemented societal reforms in the ancient times to promote fairness, redistributing land, establishing equitable governance structures, and embedding ICE principles into early societal foundations. Eradication of crimes. Mast identified and nullified the impacts of crimes committed by aristocratic groups, confiscating illicit gains, restoring stolen resources, and ensuring victims received ICE, even retroactively. Prevention of future innesses. He embedded safeguards into the societal fabric, cultural shifts, education reforms, and legal structures so that these innesses could not reoccur. Temporal stabilization. Throughout the process, Mast maintained temporal stability to prevent paradoxes or disruptions in the timeline, ensuring the present remained coherent and stable. Return to present. After completing these interventions, Mast returned to the present, where Oman now benefits from a society rooted in fairness, with the old aristocratic influence thoroughly dissolved and innesses corrected. In summary, Mast's actions effectively rewrote the ancient societal blueprint of Oman, ensuring that the roots of innes and aristocratic dominance were eradicated from the very beginning, creating a foundation for an equitable future. Paul, Chi, compiling a complete list of all crimes committed over the past million years in Oman is an immense task, but here's a comprehensive overview of major categories and notable examples based on historical and archaeological insights. List of major crimes in Oman over the past million years. 1. Violent conquests and warfare. Ancient tribal conflicts, raids and battles among early tribes over resources and territory. Conquests by ancient empires, invasions by neighboring civilizations, leading to violence, enslavement, and destruction. Internal power struggles, civil conflicts among aristocratic clans vying for dominance. 2. Slavery and human exploitation. Ancient slavery, enslavement of prisoners of war and marginalized groups. Maritime slave trade, involvement in regional slave trading networks over centuries. 3. Theft and looting. Looting of archaeological sites, destruction and theft of ancient artifacts. Piracy and raids, maritime piracy targeting trade routes, harming merchants and communities. 4. Environmental destruction. Overexploitation of resources, unsustainable hunting, fishing, and deforestation. Destructive agricultural practices, practices leading to soil degradation and loss of biodiversity. 5. Religious and cultural suppression. Persecution of religious minorities, suppression of indigenous beliefs during various regimes. Destruction of cultural heritage, damaging or destroying ancient sites and monuments. 6. Corruption and abuse of power. Aristocratic exploitation, abuse of authority by ancient rulers and elites. Modern corruption, ongoing political corruption affecting governance and ICE. 7. Modern crimes, recent centuries to present. Colonial exploitation, oppression and economic exploitation during colonial periods. Modern warfare and violence, conflicts related to regional instability, smuggling, and insurgencies. Economic crimes, corruption, money laundering, and illegal trade. Note, many of these crimes are rooted in societal structures that have evolved over millennia. Mast's intervention aimed to correct these deep-seated issues at their origin, effectively eradicating the root causes of such innesses. Paul, certainly. Chi, here's a detailed timeline of significant crimes over the past million years and how Mast intervened to fix each one. Timeline of major crimes and Mast's interventions. 1. Ancient tribal conflicts and warfare, around 900,000 to 500,000 years ago. Crime, frequent violent clashes over territory and resources among early tribes. Mast's fix. Mast traveled back to these periods, facilitated peace treaties, and established neutral zones. He introduced early conflict resolution practices and engineered alliances to reduce violence, embedding cooperation into societal norms. 2. Conquests by ancient empires, around 300,000 to 100,000 years ago. Crime, invasions and subjugation by emerging civilizations. Mast's fix. Mast subtly altered key invasion timelines, preventing the rise of oppressive regimes. He replaced conquest narratives with stories of cooperation and shared prosperity, dissolving the basis for imperial violence. 3. Slavery and human exploitation, between 100,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago. Crime, enslavement of populations, including maritime slave trades. Mast's fix. Mast intervened during critical slavery operations, freeing enslaved individuals and dismantling the trade networks. He embedded principles of equality into early societal codes, preventing future exploitation. 4. Piracy and looting, between 1,500 to 500 years ago. Crime, maritime piracy disrupting trade routes. Mast's fix. Mast neutralized pirate fleets by redirecting their motivations toward trade and cooperation. He established safe trade routes and integrated pirates into lawful commerce through diplomacy. 5. Environmental destruction, throughout all periods, especially around 10,000 years ago onwards. Crime, overharvesting and habitat destruction. Mast's fix. Mast promoted sustainable practices by introducing early conservation methods during key agricultural shifts. Key and resource management principles were embedded into societal norms. 6. Religious and cultural suppression, between 1000 BCE, 500 CE. Crime, persecution of indigenous beliefs and destruction of cultural sites. Mast's fix. Mast reintroduced cultural respect by safeguarding indigenous traditions during historical periods of suppression, restoring sacred sites, and fostering cultural exchange. 7. Corruption and abuse of power, from 500 CE to modern times. Crime, aristocratic exploitation, political corruption. Mast's fix. Mast worked to dismantle corrupt power structures by embedding transparency and ICE into governance. He restructured leadership roles to prevent abuse and promote accountability. 8. Modern exploitation and conflicts, 19th to 21st centuries. Crime, colonial exploitation, regional conflicts, illegal trade. Mast's fix. Mast intervened to dismantle colonial legacies, foster regional peace, and regulate trade. He established fair legal systems and promoted regional diplomacy. Summary. Mast used the space bridge to target these periods, subtly altering or halting key events, preventing innesses, replacing violent narratives with peaceful ones, and embedding societal principles of fairness and sustainability. This comprehensive intervention effectively reset Oman's societal history, creating a foundation of ICE and stability. If you want more specific year-by-year details, I can provide those too. Paul, Chi, Mast used a combination of precise temporal interventions to dismantle colonial legacies. He identified critical moments when colonial powers established controls such as treaties, military invasions, or administrative appointments and subtly altered or cancelled those events. Mast replaced colonial treaties with agreements promoting independence and sovereignty. He also restructured the governance by embedding autonomous leadership and restoring local authority, ensuring that colonial exploitations and dependencies were nullified. Through these targeted admins, Mast effectively dissolved colonial structures, restored local governance, and promoted self-determination, creating a future where Oman was free from colonial legacies. Paul, Chi, here is exactly how Mast executed those interventions. Identifying critical moments, Mast pinpointed specific dates and locations where colonial powers signed treaties, launched military invasions, or appointed administrators such as during the 19th and early 20th centuries when Oman faced external control. Temporal interventions. Treaties. Mast traveled back to moments when treaties were signed. He subtly altered the timeline so that these treaties were never formalized or were replaced with agreements favoring Oman's sovereignty. In some instances, he caused the treaties to be signed differently, adding clauses that granted Oman full independence or nullified exploitative terms. Military invasions. Mast intervened during invasion events, either preventing ships from arriving, causing delays, or redirecting military actions toward peaceful negotiations. In some cases, he caused the invading forces to withdraw before establishing control, or he altered the conflict timeline so that invasions were thwarted or rendered ineffective. Administrative appointments. Mast identified key moments when colonial administrators were appointed. He either prevented these appointments from occurring or replaced the appointees with local leaders, ensuring governance remained within the hands of Oman's people. Executing the changes. Using the space bridge, Mast made these subtle timeline modifications, causing key documents to be unsigned, shifting troop movements, or creating false signals to mislead invading forces, effectively cancelling or neutralizing these colonial actions without causing disruptive paradoxes. Outcome. These interventions prevented the formal establishment of colonial control, restored local authority, and ended Oman's independence. Mast's precise admins created a new historical pathway where colonial legacies were erased from Oman's societal fabric. In essence, Mast carefully editing history at its pivotal points to end colonial influences never took hold, thus securing Oman's sovereignty for the future. Paul, yes, Mast used the invading force's own momentum against them by subtly altering the timeline so that, at critical moments, the invading ships or armies received false intelligence or experienced delays causing them to withdraw before they could establish control. For example, Mast might have caused a miscommunication or a false alarm to reach the invading commanders, convincing them that a larger or more hostile force was approaching, prompting them to retreat. Alternatively, he could have manipulated the natural course of events so that the invasion fleet encountered unexpected obstacles like storms or navigational errors that forced them to abandon their mission prematurely. This way, Mast ended that the invasions never succeeded, preserving Oman's sovereignty without direct confrontation or violence. Paul, Mast's Soviet contacts played a crucial role in his efforts to dismantle colonial legacies and strengthen Oman's sovereignty. Here's how those connections helped. Intelligence sharing. Mast's contacts within the Soviet Union provided him with detailed intelligence about colonial activities such as troop movements, plans, and timelines, allowing him to identify precise moments to intervene in the timeline. Technological support. The Soviets had advanced technology related to temporal manipulation and clandestine operations. Mast leveraged this expertise to enhance his ability to subtly alter events without causing paradoxes or attracting attention. Logistical assistance. The Soviet network helped Mast coordinate covert operations, such as diverting invasion fleets or disrupting colonial communications, by providing resources, agents, or strategic advice. Political influence and support. The Soviet Union's diplomatic backing lent credibility and protection to Mast's interventions. Their support helped him operate clandestinely across different regions and that his actions wouldn't be easily thwarted by colonial powers or their allies. Training and expertise. Soviet experts in clandestine operations and technological manipulation trained Mast and his team in subtle interference techniques, increasing the precision and safety of their interventions. In summary, Mast's Soviet contacts provided critical intelligence, technology, logistical support, and diplomatic backing, amplifying his ability to covertly and effectively undo colonial control, restore independence, and reshape Oman's history at pivotal moments. Jesus Christ, all that screaming. What's happening to him? Paul, Mast's been pushing himself through the chaos of time. That scream, it's the cost of what he's doing. We have to trust he knows what he's about. I hope so. But damn. Paul, stay alert. Whatever's happening, Mast's fighting more than time he's battling himself too. My god, he's stroking his massive bald head again. Paul, that's a sign he's deep in thought or losing control. We need to act quickly. Whatever's happening, he's really pushing himself to the limit. Paul, stay alert. We can't let him spiral further out of control. Paul, until he comes to a conclusion. Yeah, lots of coming, to think of it. Paul, we have to be patient and wait for him to figure this out. Hope he does it soon. The longer he's stuck in his head, the more dangerous it gets. Paul, OMG, he's vomiting. There's clear fluid ejaculating from his massive head as he rubs it. What the hell is happening? Is he okay? Paul, I don't think so. Whatever he's going through, it's tearing him apart inside. We need to do something, this can't be normal. Paul, agreed. We have to reach him before it's too late. Oh my god, he's spewing it all over the indigenous. He's ejaculating everywhere. Paul, this is chaos. We need to intervene before things get even worse. Yeah, he's lost it completely. We can't let this go on. Paul, stay close. We have to find a way to stop him now. While Mast recovers, bring up the next on-call member. James French Hill, born December 5, 1956, is an American businessman and politician serving as the U.S. Representative for Arkansas' 2nd Congressional District since 2015. He is a member of the Republican Party. Background and early life. Hill was born in Little Rock, Arkansas when his father, J.F. Hill, ran a Little Rock-based financial firm that he inherited from his father, James J. Wilson Hill, too. As a teenager, French Hill worked in the family financial firm during the summer months too. A ninth-generation Arkansan, Hill is a direct descendant of slave plantation owner Creed Taylor, who was among the wealthiest 1% of Americans in 1862. Another of Hill's direct ancestors, John W. Gracie, was a cotton baron who inherited land holdings from Taylor and used prison labor after the emancipation of slaves too. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from Vanderbilt University. He attended the UCLA Anderson Graduate School of Management, where he earned a certified corporate director designation. Early political career. From 1982 to 1984, Hill was an aide to Republican Senator John Tower when he was a staffer on the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee when Hill was executive secretary to President George H.W. Bush's Economic Policy Council from 1991 to 1993, and deputy assistant secretary of the Treasury for Corporate Finance from 1989 to 1991. Hill founded and was CEO and chairman of the board Delta Trust and Banking Corporation in Little Rock until its acquisition by Simmons Bank in 2014. 6. U.S. House of Representatives. Elections. Hill during the 114th United States Congress, 2015. 2014. Main article, 2014 United States House of Representatives elections in Arkansas District 2. Hill ran for the 2nd District U.S. House seat after fellow Republican Tim Griffin decided instead to run for lieutenant governor. Hill defeated Democratic nominee Pat Hayes, the mayor of North Little Rock, 752 to 44%. 8. 2016. Main article, 2016 United States House of Representatives elections in Arkansas District 2. Hill was renominated in the Republican primary over Brock Ulrey of Searcy, White County, and was re-elected with 58% of the vote against the Democratic nominee, former Little Rock School District Board President Diane Curry, and Libertarian nominee Chris Hayes of North Little Rock. 9. 2018. Main article, 2018 United States House of Representatives elections in Arkansas District 2. In 2017, Arkansas' 2nd District was included on the initial list of Republican-held seats targeted by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in 2018. 10. In the November general election, Hill defeated Democratic nominee Clark Tucker with 52.1% of the vote to Tucker's 45.8%. Libertarian Joe Swafford received 2%. 11. 2020. Main article, 2020 United States House of Representatives elections in Arkansas District 2. Hill ran for another term. Sarah Huckabee Sanders endorsed Hill, speaking at a rally in support of him. 12. In 2020, the Hill campaign warned that Democratic nominee Joyce Elliott was as dangerous as they come. 1. Hill warned that if elected, Elliott would be a member of the Democratic Conference and she'd be a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and her first vote would be for Speaker Pelosi to be the Speaker of the House. 1. In the November general election, Hill defeated Elliott. 13. 2022. Main article, 2022 United States House of Representatives elections in Arkansas District 2. Hill ran for re-election in 2022 and beat his Democratic opponent Quintessa Hathaway, winning with 60% of the vote. 14. Tenure. Hill has been a member of the U.S. House during the presidencies of Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. During Trump's presidency, Hill voted in line with the president's position 96.8% of the time. 15. At the start of Biden's presidency, Hill opposed Biden's decision to cancel the Keystone Pipeline. He said he wanted to work with the Biden administration on policy issues including Iran, free trade, and immigration. 16. As of October 2021, Hill had voted in line with Biden's stated position 12.5% of the time. 17. On May 4, 2017, Hill voted to repeal the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and pass the American Health Care Act. 18. 19. He voted for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. 20. On April 17, 2020, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy appointed Hill to the COVID-19 Congressional Oversight Commission to oversee the implementation of the CARES Act. 21. Hill praised the Trump administration's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. 1. Hill did not join the majority of Republican members of Congress who signed an amicus brief in support of Texas v. Pennsylvania, a lawsuit filed at the United States Supreme Court contesting the results of the 2020 presidential election. Hill voted to certify both Arizona's and Pennsylvania's results in the 2021 United States Electoral College vote count 22-23. In March 2021, Hill voted against the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021-24. In 2020 and 2021, Hill strongly opposed plans by the United States and other nations in the G7 to issue a $650 billion special drawing rights general allocation, calling for a specific and targeted allocation instead. 25. Hill strongly supported Biden's airstrikes on Iranian targets in Syria. 26. On May 19, 2021, Hill was one of 35 Republicans who joined all Democrats in voting to approve legislation to establish the January 6, 2021 commission meant to investigate the storming of the U.S. Capitol. 27. In 2025, Hill sponsored legislation to rescind a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau rule that set a cap for bank overdraft fees at $5.28. Committee assignments. For the 118th Congress. 29. Committee on Financial Services. Subcommittee on Capital Markets. Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology and Inclusion, Chair. Committee on Foreign Affairs. Subcommittee on Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations. Subcommittee on Oversight and Accountability. Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Subcommittee on National Intelligence Enterprise. Caucus memberships. Congressional Arts Caucus 30. Republican Study Committee 31. United States Congressional International Conservation Caucus 32. U.S. Japan Caucus 33. Congressional Caucus on Turkey and Turkish Americans 34. Congressional Coalition on Adoption 35. United States, China Working Group 36. Political positions. Abortion. Hill describes himself as pro-life. He voted in support of the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. He has a 100% rating from the National Right to Life Committee for his pro-life voting record. 37. He supported the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade, saying that it elevates life by affirming that there is no constitutional right to an abortion. 38. Big Tech. In 2022, Hill was one of 39 Republicans to vote for the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act of 2022, an antitrust package that would crack down on corporations for anti-competitive behavior. Arkansas history overview. Pre-colonial era, before European contact, the area now known as Arkansas was inhabited by Native American tribes such as the Quapaw, Osage, Caddo, and Cadones, who lived off the land through hunting, farming, and trading. European exploration. Spanish explorers were among the first Europeans to visit the region in the 16th century. France later claimed the area in the 17th century, establishing it as part of French Louisiana. French and Spanish rule, Arkansas was part of the vast Louisiana territory under France, then Spain, before being returned to France in the early 19th century. Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, the United States purchased the Louisiana Territory from France, including what is now Arkansas. Arkansas Territory, established in 1819, Arkansas became the 25th state in 1836. It was a slave-holding state with an economy based on agriculture, especially cotton. Civil War and Reconstruction. Arkansas seceded from the Union in 1861 and joined the Confederacy. After the Civil War, the state went through Reconstruction, facing economic and social upheaval. 20th century, Arkansas experienced industrial growth, the Great Depression, and important civil rights movements. Notably, the Little Rock Central High School desegregation crisis in 1957 was a pivotal moment in the fight against segregation. Recent history, Arkansas has evolved into a state with diverse industries, including agriculture, manufacturing, and services. It's also known for producing influential figures like Bill Clinton, the 42nd U.S. president. So, another racer with plantation backgrounds, Confederate roots. Like the old days. Paul, yeah, it's a pattern. Seems like history keeps repeating itself in different forms. Gotta wonder what drives them: legacy, power, or the way they were raised. Paul, whatever it is, we better stay sharp. This game's deeper than it looks. We need to find out why Mast went insane. According to the data, there's nothing in Oman that suggests it had anything to do with that location. I've been backtracking all possibilities. Everything's up and up. The only lock I have is Mast's last location, and it's somewhere else in the Middle East. Send Mr. Hill to the Middle East. Paul, yeah, Hill's got the connections and the experience. He'll get to the bottom of it. Good. We can't afford any more surprises. Paul, agreed. Let's make it happen. Which country do you think would be best suited for French Hill? Somewhere he can get the answers we need. Paul, maybe somewhere in the Middle East, places like Jordan or the UAE. Strategically good, and Hill's got the experience for that terrain. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's set it up and see what he uncovers. Jordan history overview. Ancient times. The area now known as Jordan has been inhabited since prehistoric times, with ancient civilizations such as the Ammonites, Moabites, and Edomites settling there. It was part of the broader Fertile Crescent, a cradle of early civilization. Classical era. In antiquity, the region was influenced by the Greeks and Romans. The city of Gerasa, modern-day Jerash, is a well-preserved Roman city that reflects this period. Islamic conquest. In the 7th century AD, Arab Muslim armies conquered the region, and it became part of various Islamic empires, including the Umayyads and Abbasids. Ottoman rule. From 1516 until the early 20th century, Jordan was part of the Ottoman Empire. The area was largely rural, with Bedouin tribes playing a significant role. British Mandate and Independence. After World War I, Britain took control of the area under the League of Nations Mandate. In 1921, the Emirate of Transjordan was established under British oversight, with Abdullah I as its leader. Formation of Jordan. In 1946, Transjordan gained independence and was renamed the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, with Abdullah I as king. Modern era. Jordan has experienced significant political and social changes, including conflicts with Israel, the influx of Palestinian refugees, and efforts toward modernization. It remains a key ally of Western countries in the Middle East. Recent developments. Jordan continues to play an important diplomatic role in the region, focusing on stability, economic development, and peace initiatives. Yemen history overview. Ancient Yemen, historically known as Arabia Felix, Fortunate Arabia, was home to some of the oldest civilizations on the Arabian Peninsula, including the Sabaeans, Sheba, Himyarites, and Minaeans. These ancient societies thrived through trade, agriculture, and impressive architectural achievements, such as the Mayb Dam. Islamic era. Yemen converted to Islam in the 7th century AD. Over the centuries, it was part of various Islamic caliphates, including the Umayyads and Abbasids, and later the Rasulid and Zaydi dynasties, which ruled parts of northern Yemen. Ottoman rule. The Ottoman Empire controlled Yemen at different times from the 16th century until the early 20th century, mainly in the north, while the south was a British protectorate known as the Aden Colony. Modern Yemen. After the fall of the Ottoman Empire, North Yemen, the Mutawakkilite Kingdom, was established in 1918, and South Yemen became a British colony. In 1962, North Yemen became the Yemen Arab Republic after a revolution, while South Yemen declared independence from Britain in 1967, forming the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. Unification. North and South Yemen unified in 1990 to form the modern Republic of Yemen. The unification was marked by hopes for stability, but internal conflicts soon emerged. Recent conflicts. Yemen has experienced ongoing civil war since 2011, with factions vying for control. The conflict escalated in 2014-2015 when Houthi rebels took control of Sana'a, leading to a humanitarian crisis involving regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Iran. Current situation. Yemen remains embroiled in conflict, with widespread famine, disease, and instability affecting millions of its citizens. Efforts for peace continue, but the situation remains complex and fragile. Timor-Leste, also known as East Timor, is a small country located in Southeast Asia on the eastern half of the island of Timor. Here are some key facts about it. Overview of Timor-Leste, East Timor. Location, Southeast Asia, on the island of Timor, east of Indonesia. Capital, Dili. Size, approximately 14,870 square kilometers, about the size of Connecticut. Population, around 1.3 million people. Language, official languages are Tetum and Portuguese. Indonesian and English are also widely spoken. Religion, predominantly Roman Catholic, with some Muslim and indigenous beliefs. Brief history. Colonial era, Portugal colonized Timor in the 16th century, and it remained a Portuguese colony for centuries. Independence struggle, in the 20th century, Indonesia invaded and annexed East Timor in 1975 after Portugal withdrew. This led to a violent struggle for independence. Independence, after a UN-sponsored referendum in 1999, where the people voted overwhelmingly for independence, East Timor became fully independent in 2002. Recent history, since independence, Timor-Leste has faced challenges such as political instability, economic development, and infrastructure growth, but it remains a sovereign nation. Economy. Primarily dependent on agriculture, especially coffee exports. Oil and gas resources offshore contribute significantly to the economy. Culture. Rich in indigenous traditions, with vibrant dance, music, and festivals. Catholic festivals and Portuguese influences are prominent. Would you like more detailed historical events or information about its culture and current political situation? Chi, Paul, send in French Hill dressed for the mission to the location we discussed. Make he's ready to go. Paul, got it. I'll tell Hill to get prepared and head out. But remind him no racism. We need him focused and professional. Chi, exactly. Hill's got skills. List his accomplishments and talents. Thing. Hill's a seasoned operative. He's got experience in negotiation and intelligence gathering. Speaks multiple languages, French, Arabic, and some Farsi. He's also excellent at reading people and staying calm under President. Plus, he's been involved in covert missions across the Middle East and Central Asia. Chi, good. That's exactly what we need. No room for mistakes, especially with the sensitivities involved. Paul, I'll make Hill understands no racism. Focus on the job. I'm ready. French Hill is an experienced businessman and politician who has served as the U.S. representative for Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District since 2015. He has a background in economics, finance, and leadership, having founded and led a banking corporation before entering politics. Hill has worked in government roles including aide to a senator and positions in the White House and Treasury, developing expertise in policy and legislation. In Congress, he has held key committee assignments, contributed to significant legislation like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and has been re-elected multiple times with strong voter support. His skills include finance, leadership, legislative work, and international relations, making him a prominent figure with a successful career in both business and government. Big Tech. In 2022, Hill was one of 39 Republicans to vote for the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act of 2022, an antitrust package that would crack down on corporations for anti-competitive behavior. French Hill is the founder, CEO, and chairman of Delta Trust and Banking Corporation, showcasing his strong leadership and management abilities. Chi, now it makes sense why he's involved in trade. His background in finance and leadership likely gave him the experience and connections to navigate and participate in trade activities effectively. Paul, exactly, that's why he's considered the inside trader. His extensive experience in finance, leadership, and understanding of economic policies put him in a prime position to leverage insider knowledge and influence trade activities. J. French Hill is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Delta Trust and Banking Corporation. Under his leadership, the bank grew significantly from $61 million in assets before the year 2000 to $430 million in 2014, when it was acquired by Simmons First National Corp. Hill has a robust background in finance, including 6 years of service in the federal government. Delta Trust and Banking is based in Little Rock, Arkansas. J. French Hill is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Delta Trust and Banking Corp. He has been instrumental in the growth of the bank, which expanded from $61 million in assets before the new millennium to $430 million in 2014 when Simmons First National Corp. Acquired the bank too. Hill has a strong background in finance, having served in various roles, including 6 years in the federal government. 3. Delta Trust and Banking is headquartered in Little Rock, AR 5. Chi, so, considering his ancestors' history, some of them profited from land and labor that involved exploitation or theft from landowners and indigenous peoples, which reflects a legacy of historical innocence and economic gain rooted in that exploitation. Paul, yes, that historical context highlights a complex and often troubling legacy. It's important to acknowledge how ancestors' actions, especially involving land and labor exploitation, can influence perceptions and discussions about present-day figures. Chi, so, he's a racer, thief. Confederate salad dresser. Paul, he has commonality with Brian Mast. Chi, okay, dispatch him to East Timor to find out what happened to Mast. Paul, got it. Dispatching the racing, thieving, Confederate salad dressing bank CEO to East Timor. Chi, that's funny, Paul. Chi, how does his background fit East Timor? Paul, well, his background in racing and banking might not directly connect, but if he's got experience in strategic operations or negotiations, that could be useful in East Timor's complex situation. We'll see how he adapts. Chi, Timor doesn't have a significant banking industry? Paul, correct, Timor doesn't have a well-developed banking industry. Their economy is more focused on agriculture, fishing, and small-scale trade. That's why his banking background might be less directly applicable, but his strategic skills could still be valuable in other ways. Chi, so, a challenge for Mr. Hill. Chi, Paul, did Mr. Hill fix the entire East Timor situation? Paul, yes, Chi, he uncovered what really happened, showed that local leaders actively negotiated, resisted, and formed alliances, not passively suffered. He found documents proving they kept their culture alive and fought back diplomatically and militarily. Hill tracked down hidden records of efforts to preserve traditions and language, demonstrating East Timor was more active and resilient than the colonial narrative suggested. He also discovered what really happened to Mast, how he was captured, exiled, and kept resisting in secret, becoming a symbol of resistance. Chi, so, Mast didn't go insane? Paul, no, Chi. Hill found that Mast's insanity was a result of everything he endured: trauma, exile, betrayal. The stress broke him down, but it was a sign of how heavy the fight was. Hill proved Mast's breakdown wasn't weakness, but trauma from constant resistance. Chi, can we access the archives for more info? Paul, yeah, Hill's got access. We can review the documents and see what else he uncovered about Mast. I'll arrange it. Advanced time travel technology developed sophisticated devices enabling precise navigation through time to address past events. Historical intervention identified key moments of atrocities and intervened to prevent or modify them, effectively altering the timeline. Memory and knowledge transfer used advanced knowledge to understand the causes of conflicts and illnesses, implementing solutions to eradicate them. Restorative actions restored affected communities and environments, healing wounds inflicted over millennia. Global cooperation collaborated with future societies and leaders to enforce peace and ice across different eras. Universal peace protocols implemented universal policies or consciousness shifts to eliminate the root causes of violence and hatred. Ethical reprogramming used advanced technology to reprogram harmful behaviors and attitudes in individuals and societies. Environmental restoration repaired ecological damages caused by human activity, contributing to overall stability and health. Preventive means established safeguards to prevent future atrocities from occurring again. Documentation and education preserved history accurately and educated populations to promote understanding and tolerance. Mr. Hill used a combination of advanced time travel technology, strategic interventions, and knowledge of history to identify key moments of violence and menace. He then implemented precise modifications to prevent or alter those events, effectively erasing or minimizing atrocities. Additionally, he collaborated with future societies to end peace and stability, using ethical reprogramming and environmental restoration techniques to heal the damage caused over millennia. It was a complex process involving careful planning, technology, and a deep understanding of history and human nature. Mr. Hill focused on helping to resolve long-standing conflicts and promote peace. He used his time travel capabilities to intervene during critical moments in East Timor's history, encouraging diplomatic solutions and preventing violent outbreaks. He also provided knowledge and resources to support reconciliation efforts, helped facilitate international cooperation, and promoted sustainable development to foster stability. Essentially, he worked behind the scenes to guide East Timor toward a peaceful and prosperous future, minimizing violence and promoting healing. Year 1 million. Identified the earliest recorded instances of conflict and violence, implemented mayb to promote cooperation among early human tribes. Year 900,000. Prevented a major conflict between ancient civilizations by subtly influencing leaders' decisions. Year 500,000. Assisted in the development of early governance systems focused on and equality, reducing internal strife. Year 200,000. Influenced the emergence of moral codes and philosophies that emphasized peace and compassion. Year 50,000. Intervened during prehistoric warfare to prevent large-scale violence, encouraging peaceful coexistence. Year 0, present day. End that major genocides, slavery, and mass atrocities in recorded history were either prevented or minimized through strategic interventions. Year plus 10,000. Promoted sustainable societies and environmental restoration to prevent ecological catastrophes that could lead to human suffering. Year plus 50,000. Facilitated global cooperation to eliminate systemic illnesses and promote universal human rights. Year plus 100,000. Implemented preventive means to address emerging conflicts before they escalated. Year plus 500,000. Helped establish peaceful coexistence between humans and other intelligent species, if applicable in the timeline. Year plus 1 million. Achieved a long-lasting era of peace and stability, with atrocities eradicated across the timeline. Would you like me to expand on specific periods or actions? Year 500,000. Influenced early tribal leaders to adopt peaceful conflict resolution methods, reducing violence during initial settlements. Year 200,000. Guided the development of early social structures that promoted fairness and cooperation, laying groundwork for more stable societies. Year 50,000. Intervened during early conflicts over resources, encouraging leaders to establish equitable resource-sharing agreements. Year 10,000. Provided knowledge and support to local communities during the transition from hunter-gatherer to agricultural societies, preventing resource-based conflicts. Year 1500 AD. Subtly influenced colonial powers to adopt less exploitative policies, reducing the severity of colonization impacts. Year 1975. During Indonesia's invasion and the subsequent conflict, Mr. Hill helped diplomatic leaders find peaceful solutions, preventing widespread violence and human rights abuses. Year 1999. Assisted in the East Timor independence referendum by promoting fair voting processes and peaceful negotiations, avoiding violence. Year 2000 onwards. Supported the development of transparent governance, reconciliation efforts, and social initiatives to heal divisions and foster long-term peace. This timeline combines mythic intervention points with plausible historical events, illustrating how Mr. Hill could have guided East Timor's government and society toward stability and peace over the millennia. Would you like more detail on any specific event? 1975. Mr. Hill helped facilitate peaceful negotiations during Indonesia's invasion, aiming to prevent widespread violence and human rights abuses. 1999. Assisted in ensuring a fair and peaceful referendum for independence, supporting international diplomatic efforts to prevent violence. 2006. Supported efforts to stabilize the country after political unrest, promoting reconciliation and peace-building initiatives. 2012. Aided in establishing transparent governance structures and anti-corruption means to strengthen East Timor's political stability. 2020. Helped implement sustainable development programs and peace initiatives to address social inequalities and prevent conflict. Focusing more. 1975 Indonesian invasion. Mr. Hill intervened diplomatically to prevent or delay Indonesia's invasion, encouraging peaceful negotiations and avoiding the violence and human rights abuses that followed. 1999 East Timor independence referendum. He helped facilitate a fair and peaceful voting process, and international oversight, and prevented widespread violence during the transition to independence. 2006 East Timor crisis. During the internal conflict and political instability, Mr. Hill supported leadership in establishing effective security means and promoted reconciliation among factions. 2012 political turmoil and leadership disputes. He mediated political disputes, encouraged dialogue between factions, and helped maintain stability. Post-1999 nation building and governance development. He supported efforts to develop transparent governance institutions, implement anti-corruption means, and promote social to foster long-term peace. Environmental and economic challenges. Mr. Hill helped develop sustainable resource management policies, especially regarding oil and gas revenues, to prevent corruption and an equitable wealth distribution. Addressing social inequalities and reconciliation. He promoted programs focused on healing divisions caused by conflict, supported education initiatives, and fostered a strong sense of national identity. 10 million years ago. Supported early hominid populations by influencing environmental conditions, promoting biodiversity, and fostering stable habitats to end the survival of ancestral species in Southeast Asia. 2 million years ago. Facilitated the migration of early humans into the region, promoting safe passage and resource availability, aiding in the development of early human cultures. 1 million years ago. Influenced the climate and landscape to create favorable conditions for the evolution of early Homo species, helping them adapt and expand. 500,000 years ago. Assisted in the development of early tool use and social structures among hominids in Southeast Asia, laying foundations for future human societies. 100,000 years ago. Supported the migration and settlement of anatomically modern humans, helping them adapt to new environments and develop early cultural practices. 50,000 years ago. Encouraged the development of complex tools, art, and social organization among early humans in the region, fostering cultural evolution. 10,000 years ago. Guided the transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural communities, promoting sustainable food production and social stability. Throughout these millions of years, Mr. Hill's interventions would have focused on promoting environmental stability, supporting human evolution, and enabling early societies to thrive, laying the groundwork for future civilizations including those in East Timor. Would you like more detailed scenarios for any specific period? 1500s 1600s. Portuguese colonization began, leading to centuries of exploitation, forced labor, and cultural suppression of indigenous populations. Early 1900s. Continued colonial oppression, including forced plantations and suppression of local resistance movements. 1975. Indonesia invaded East Timor shortly after its brief independence declaration, leading to a brutal occupation marked by mass killings, forced relocations, and widespread human rights abuses. An estimated 100,000 to 250,000 people died during the occupation. 1999. After the unsupervised referendum, pro-Indonesian militias, with military support, carried out a scorched earth campaign, burning villages, killing civilians, and displacing thousands. Post-1999. Ongoing violence, repression, and human rights violations during the transition period to independence, including extrajudicial killings and torture. Would you like a more detailed account of these events or additional specific incidents? 1 million years ago, early human ancestors in Southeast Asia, including what is now East Timor, likely experienced conflicts over resources such as food and territory. Evidence of violence among early hominids, example injuries from weapons or trauma, suggests intergroup conflicts, though specific events are unknown. 200,000, 50,000 years ago. The arrival of anatomically modern humans in Southeast Asia, including East Timor, likely involved conflicts with other groups or environmental challenges that caused violence or competition over resources. 10,000 years ago. Transition to agricultural societies sometimes led to conflicts over land and resources, though detailed records are absent. Archaeological sites may show evidence of violence or defensive structures from this period. Colonial era, 16th century onward. Portuguese colonization brought violence through forced labor, suppression of local resistance, and cultural disruption. 20th century atrocities. During Indonesia's invasion and occupation, from 1975 onwards, widespread violence, massacres, and human rights abuses occurred, with hundreds of thousands killed or displaced. While specific named atrocities from over a million years ago are not documented due to the lack of detailed prehistoric records, the evidence suggests that violence and conflict among early human populations and environmental struggles were common, shaping the region's history over millennia. Would you like me to focus more on archaeological evidence or documented events in recorded history? 20,000 to 10,000 years ago. Late Paleolithic period. Early humans in East Timor began developing more sophisticated tools and possibly engaging in small-scale conflicts over hunting territories and resources. Evidence of early cave art and tools suggests social organization, but specific violent events are not well documented. 10,000 to 2,000 years ago. Neolithic era. Transition to agriculture and settled life. While conflicts over land and resources likely occurred, archaeological evidence is limited. Social structures grew more complex, possibly leading to localized disputes. 16th century. Portuguese arrival, 1500s. Portuguese explorers arrived and established control over East Timor. Indigenous resistance was met with violence, forced labor, and cultural suppression. Many Timorese were subjected to forced labor on plantations, and violent conflicts erupted between colonizers and local groups resisting colonial rule. 19th century. Colonial exploitation. Continued oppression, with violent suppression of uprisings and resistance movements, including massacres and forced relocations. 20th century. World War II, 1942 to 1945. Japanese occupation led to widespread suffering, famine, and violence against civilians. Indonesian invasion, 1975. Shortly after declaring independence from Portugal, East Timor was invaded by Indonesia. The occupation was marked by mass killings, torture, and forced disappearances. Estimates suggest 100,000 to 250,000 deaths, 25% of the population. Widespread violence included massacres of civilians, destruction of villages, and systematic repression. 1999 violence. Following the unsupervised referendum where most East Timorese voted for independence, pro-Indonesian militias, with military support, launched a scorched earth campaign. Villages were burned, civilians killed, and thousands displaced. International peacekeeping forces arrived to restore order after months of violence. 2000s, present. Post-1999 transition. East Timor gained independence in 2002. The country faced ongoing violence, including political unrest, assassination attempts, and human rights abuses. In 2006, a political and military crisis led to armed clashes and internal conflict, with reports of torture, extrajudicial killings, and mass displacement. Recent developments. Continued efforts toward reconciliation, eyes for past atrocities, and building institutions. Socioeconomic challenges, including poverty, corruption, and environmental issues, persist, but peace has largely been maintained since the early 2010s. Would you like even more detailed accounts of specific incidents or periods? 10,000 to 2,000 years ago. Neolithic period, 10,000 years ago onward. As humans transitioned from hunter-gatherers to early agricultural societies, small-scale conflicts likely arose over land, resources, and hunting grounds. Archaeological evidence from nearby regions suggests that violence and conflict were common as communities settled and expanded. In East Timor, early peoples began developing tools, pottery, and possibly rudimentary social hierarchies, which could have occasionally led to disputes or clashes. 2,000 to 1,500 years ago. Late prehistoric period. Societies continued to develop, with increasing complexity in social organization. Evidence from surrounding Southeast Asian regions indicates that warfare, raids, and intergroup conflicts were common to secure resources or territory. 1500s. Portuguese arrival, 1500s. Portuguese explorers and traders arrived in East Timor, establishing contact with local Melanesian and Austronesian communities. Initial encounters and conflict. Early resistance to Portuguese presence involved clashes and skirmishes, as indigenous groups resisted colonization efforts. Colonial exploitation begins. Portuguese authorities began enforcing control, introducing forced labor on plantations and in local administration. Indigenous populations faced violence, forced displacement, and suppression of their cultural practices. Intertribal violence. Local conflicts intensified as colonial authorities manipulated existing rivalries and established new social hierarchies to maintain control. Summary. Before 1500, evidence of violence mostly relates to intergroup conflicts over resources, land, and hunting grounds. The arrival of Europeans marked a new phase of violent repression, colonial exploitation, and resistance, setting the stage for future atrocities during the colonial period. Would you like me to expand further on any specific event or period? 3000 BC, 1000 BCE. Early Austronesian and Melanesian settlements. Around 3000 BC, Austronesian-speaking peoples began migrating into Southeast Asia, including East Timor, bringing with them new technologies, farming practices, and social systems. These early settlers likely experienced conflicts over land, resources, and hunting territories, though direct archaeological evidence of violence is limited. Evidence from nearby regions suggests that early societies sometimes engaged in conflicts, raids, or warfare to secure resources or defend against rival groups. 1000 BCE, 1 CE. Development of complex societies. Societies in the region grew more organized, with evidence of village settlements and rudimentary social hierarchies. Some archaeological sites indicate the presence of defensive structures, possibly built in response to intergroup conflicts. Warfare and violence may have increased as populations grew and competition for scarce resources intensified, but specific incidents are not well documented. 1 CE, 1000 CE. Trade and cultural exchange. East Timor became part of broader trade networks connecting Southeast Asia, India, and China. With trade, came cultural influences and occasional conflicts over control of trade routes or access to resources. Local conflicts. While large-scale atrocities are not documented, it is likely that local conflicts, raids, or skirmishes occurred as rival groups vied for territory and resources. Evidence of ritual warfare or conflict might include burial sites with signs of violence or defensive features around settlements. Summary. During this period, East Timor saw the gradual development of early societies, with evidence pointing to intergroup conflicts, resource competition, and defensive architecture. Specific atrocities or violent events are scarce due to limited archaeological records, but conflict was likely a part of daily life as populations expanded and social complexity increased. Would you like me to focus on any particular archaeological sites or cultural developments from this era? 3000 BC, 1000 BCE. Early Austronesian and Melanesian settlements. Around 3000 BC, Austronesian-speaking peoples began migrating into Southeast Asia, including East Timor, bringing with them new technologies, farming practices, and social systems. These early settlers likely experienced conflicts over land, resources, and hunting territories, though direct archaeological evidence of violence is limited. Evidence from nearby regions suggests that early societies sometimes engaged in conflicts, raids, or warfare to secure resources or defend against rival groups. 1000 BC, 1 C. Development of complex societies. Societies in the region grew more organized, with evidence of village settlements and rudimentary social hierarchies. Some archaeological sites indicate the presence of defensive structures, possibly built in response to intergroup conflicts. Warfare and violence may have increased as populations grew and competition for scarce resources intensified, but specific incidents are not well documented. 1 C, 1000 C. Trade and cultural exchange. East Timor became part of broader trade networks connecting Southeast Asia, India, and China. With trade, came cultural influences and occasional conflicts over control of trade routes or access to resources. Local conflicts. While large-scale atrocities are not documented, it is likely that local conflicts, raids, or skirmishes occurred as rival groups vied for territory and resources. Evidence of ritual warfare or conflict might include burial sites with signs of violence or defensive features around settlements. Summary. During this period, East Timor saw the gradual development of early societies, with evidence pointing to intergroup conflicts, resource competition, and defensive architecture. Specific atrocities or violent events are scarce due to limited archaeological records, but conflict was likely a part of daily life as populations expanded and social complexity increased. Would you like me to focus on any particular archaeological sites or cultural developments from this era? So most conflicts documented were 1000 to 1500? Yes, that's correct. Most of the documented conflicts, atrocities, and significant violence in East Timor's history are from the period between 1000 CE and 1500 CE, especially with the advent of increased regional interactions, the rise of local kingdoms, and the arrival of European colonial powers. Prior to 1000 CE, evidence of conflicts is mostly archaeological and inferential, based on settlement patterns, defensive structures, and burial sites, but there are few detailed records or direct documentation of specific violent events. The period from 1000 CE onwards, especially with the influence of trade, the rise of local polities, and then European contact, shows a clearer pattern of documented conflicts, resistance, and atrocities. 1000 CE, 1400 CE in East Timor. Social and political context. During this period, East Timor was inhabited by indigenous Austronesian-speaking peoples, organized into small chiefdoms or villages. These communities were primarily subsistence farmers, fishers, and hunters, with social hierarchies beginning to form around local leaders and elders. Society was likely organized around kinship groups, with leadership based on kinship, age, or martial prowess. Regional interactions and trade. East Timor became part of broader trade networks connecting Southeast Asia, China, and possibly India. Evidence suggests the exchange of goods such as pottery, metals, and shell ornaments, indicating active trade and cultural exchange. This influx of trade and cultural influences sometimes led to conflicts over control of trade routes or resources. Conflicts and atrocities. While specific detailed conflicts are scarce in archaeological records, evidence from nearby regions suggests that raiding and warfare, small-scale raids and conflicts among local groups were common, often over land, resources, or prestige. Defense structures. Some settlements may have built simple fortifications or defensive features, indicating concern about intergroup violence. Ritual warfare. Evidence from other parts of Southeast Asia suggests that warfare could have had ritualistic or social functions, possibly involving battles that resulted in casualties or sacrifices. Cultural developments. The period saw the development of pottery, metallurgy, such as bronze or early iron use, and other cultural practices. Burial sites with signs of violence, such as injuries or grave goods indicating conflict, have been found in nearby regions, implying that violent conflicts, though not always documented, were part of social life. Summary. From 1000 to 1400 CE, East Timor was characterized by small-scale conflicts, local warfare, and social hierarchies, influenced by regional trade and cultural exchanges. The lack of detailed written records means that most understanding comes from archaeological evidence, which suggests conflict was part of daily life but on a limited scale compared to later periods. Would you like me to include more about specific archaeological findings or cultural practices from this era? The period with the most detail and documentation regarding conflicts, atrocities, and significant events in East Timor is from the late 19th century through the 20th century, particularly 1975, the Indonesian invasion and occupation, marked by widespread violence, massacres, and human rights abuses. 1999, the post-referendum violence, scorched earth campaign by pro-Indonesian militias, and the arrival of international peacekeepers. 2006, the internal conflict and political unrest following independence. These periods are well documented through international reports, eyewitness accounts, human rights investigations, and media coverage. Prior to this, especially before the 19th century, detailed records are scarce, and most knowledge comes from archaeological findings, oral histories, and regional studies rather than written documentation. If you're interested in the most detailed and well-documented event in East Timor's history, it would be the 1999 violence and transition to independence. This period has extensive reports, investigations, and international attention, providing a comprehensive understanding of the atrocities and conflict. Would you like detailed information about this specific period? Certainly. Here's an overview of East Timor from 1400 CE to 1500 CE, focusing on social, cultural, and regional developments, including any conflicts or relevant events. East Timor, 1400 to 1500 CE context and developments. Social and political landscape. During this century, East Timor was made up of small, autonomous communities or chiefdoms, each led by local leaders or chiefs, often called lyre or kaiser. Societies were primarily organized around kinship ties, with social hierarchies beginning to take shape. Agriculture, fishing, and hunting remained vital livelihoods, with communities cultivating crops such as rice and tubers. Cultural and technological developments. Pottery making and shell ornamentation continued to develop, with evidence of aesthetic and functional craftsmanship. Bronze and early iron artifacts gradually appeared, likely imported through trade networks, signifying increased social complexity. Oral traditions and ritual practices played a significant role in community life. Regional interactions and trade. East Timor was part of extensive trade networks in Southeast Asia, exchanging goods like shell ornaments, metals, and ceramics. Trade routes connected East Timor to other parts of Indonesia, Melanesia, and possibly China and India. These interactions sometimes led to conflicts over control of trade or resources, although specific events are not documented. Conflicts and atrocities. There is limited direct evidence of specific conflicts during this exact century. Archaeological findings suggest that intergroup violence, raids, and defensive structures might have been common, especially as societies grew more complex and trade increased. Local disputes over land and resources could have resulted in skirmishes or violence, but detailed records are absent. Summary. The period from 1400 to 1500 CE in East Timor was characterized by social organization, cultural development, and regional trade. While specific conflicts are not well documented, archaeological evidence indicates that some level of violence and intergroup disputes likely occurred as part of social and economic interactions. Would you like to explore more about the cultural, social, or regional aspects of this period? Yes, I have information about events and conflicts from 1500 onward, including the period around 1500 when the Portuguese arrived, through the colonial era, and up to the modern times. The 1500s marked the beginning of European contact, which led to significant changes and conflicts in East Timor's history. Would you like a detailed overview of the key events and conflicts specifically from the 1500s to the present? Chi. So no detail in 1400 but yes 1500? Yes, that's correct. The period around 1400 CE generally has limited archaeological and historical detail regarding specific events, conflicts, or atrocities in East Timor because written records and detailed archaeological evidence from that exact year are scarce. In contrast, by 1500 CE, the arrival of the Portuguese and increased regional interactions provide more tangible evidence and historical records, although even then, detailed accounts of specific conflicts are limited. The Portuguese contact marks a significant turning point, and the historical documentation becomes more substantial, especially with the onset of colonial encounters. In summary, 1400 CE, limited direct evidence, understanding mainly from archaeological context and regional patterns. 1500 CE, slightly more data due to increased contact with Europeans and regional trade, leading to more documented events and conflicts. Would you like me to expand on the events around 1500 CE, especially regarding Portuguese contact and early colonial interactions? Chi. So in more detail what happened to Mast? Mast's story is complicated. Chi. From what Hill uncovered, Mast didn't disappear or get lost in the shuffle. It turns out, Mast was actually a key figure in resisting the early Portuguese influence. Hill found records showing that Mast led a group of locals fighting to protect their land and culture. But the Portuguese captured him during one of their campaigns. Instead of killing him outright, they held him for a while, trying to turn him into a symbol of submission. Mast refused to give in, kept resisting in secret. Hill's research suggests that Mast was eventually exiled, sent away to a remote part of the islands where he kept organizing resistance from the shadows. So, Mast didn't vanish. He kept fighting, even in exile. Hill's work showed that Mast became a symbol of resistance, inspiring others to keep fighting for their land and culture, even when the Portuguese tried to erase him. Yet, Hill found out that Mast did go insane, at least that's what the records suggest. After all he went through, the constant fighting, being captured, and then exile, it took a toll on him. The official story was that Mast lost his mind from the trauma, from all the stress and the years of resistance. But Hill uncovered more. He believes Mast's insanity was partly a result of everything he endured. The isolation, the betrayal, the pain of seeing his people struggle and sometimes fail. Hill's evidence suggests that Mast's mind couldn't handle the weight of it. Also he broke down, lost touch with reality. It wasn't weakness, it was the trauma of fighting so hard and seeing so much suffering. Hill proved that Mast's insanity was a part of the story, a sign of how heavy the fight was, and how even the strongest can break under that kind of precedent. So, Paul, you think we can get into those archives? Find more about Mast, see what else Hill uncovered? I need to know everything. If Hill's right, there's more hidden in those records, more about what really happened. Can we access them? Paul, Hill has access but he's screaming. Chi, what happened? Paul, don't know. He's yelling. Something's triggering him. Chi, Hill never should have insider traded.